Oh, hello, and welcome to the Nomiki Show. Thanks for your patience. It's always a quick little transition going from Majority Report to TNS, but thanks for joining us today. I am Nomiki Konst, and oh, wow, does it look like maybe it turns out that the Electoral College does have a purpose? Let's roll that quick McConnell clip. Do we have that clip ready? Let's go on pause real quick. Let's read back. Sorry, guys, we're having a little bit of a technical issue. All right, we're back. Sorry about that. All right. Let's start over. It turns out that the Electoral College does actually have a purpose. Now, Mitch McConnell and his band of Trump sycophants say the election is over and Biden will be president. Interesting. That was quite remarkable last night to see Joe Biden defending the American electoral system against his defeated opponent's smears. Let's play that clip.
If anyone didn't know before, they know now. What beats deep in the hearts of the American people is this: democracy, the right to be heard, to have your vote counted, to choose leaders of this nation, to govern ourselves. In America, politicians don't take power. People grant power to them. The flame of democracy was lit in this nation a long time ago. And we now know nothing, not even a pandemic or an abuse of power, can extinguish that flame.
Flame of democracy was lit a long time ago. Well, it is true that Trump has done a lot of damage undermining the faith in elections. But as a progressive, as a New York progressive, I also have to say that there were some really big chickens coming home to roost all over Joe Biden. I will just let that image linger for a moment, okay? Our electoral system has been busted for decades. In New York, technically, the two political parties run elections, but really the Dems do, as the two parties still do in several other states. Election jobs, I don't know if you guys know this, are party patronage jobs. And so you get what you'd expect: hacks and no-shows and people who raise money and trade in favors. The party machines set up the elections to make it harder for non-machine candidates like grassroots progressives to break through. They control most primaries too, of course. Keep that in mind when you are threatening to primary some neoliberal establishment Democrat. What are your state's primary laws? The result of all this is disillusioned and uninspired voters and low turnout. Look at New York, Democratic state, very low turnout. Voters who don't believe their votes will matter or even be counted are less likely to turn out. Voters who can't see a difference between Tweedle Dems and Tweedle even dumber Republicans. So turnout falls, which helps the machine stay in power. Even in this extraordinary election year, with more votes cast than ever before, some 80 million eligible people did not vote. A third of that electorate just stayed away. And this was one of our best election days ever. Trump's effort to overturn the election, of course, was a disgrace. It was even worse that Mitch McConnell and the rest of his sorry party abetted Trump in his coup attempt. But now that it's done, let's not just go with, oh, that was Trump. Trump was riding a wave of cynicism about our elections and politics that Democrats and Republicans have worked together for years to create. One of those true bipartisan efforts. Well, enough is enough. There is a strong movement in this country to take the management of elections away from parties and their partisan appointees. So there's actual oversight to put independent professionals in charge, professionals trained and experienced in running elections that are fair and independent, professionals who understand that elections belong to the public, not to political parties, private political parties, might I add. That's the big idea here. This is supposed to be the people's government of, by, and for, but we keep losing track. And we have no problem, by the way, doing this in other countries, overseeing elections in other countries, but we have no oversight here. So I, for one, am not going to cheer on join the cheers of Bill Barr resigning in the final month. The Attorney General is the people's lawyer, not the president's lawyer. And now at the very last minute, Barr remembers that. We need to keep reminding everyone that this government belongs to us. And a good place to start is to make sure that elections are for the people, that we don't forget this moment. This is a critical, important moment. And we're just going to brush it aside. Elections are for the people. Remember, not for the parties. We have a lot to do in 2021. We have major existential crises facing us. But if we don't have the infrastructure in place, if we don't have the foundation in place, then the movement that supported the fascist tendencies of Donald Trump will only grow. One thing that we need on our to-do list is to support the movement for fair election oversight, in which it is easy to vote and easy to count the votes. Our tolerance for party hack run elections opened this window for Trump to attack everything. He grew up in it. He maneuvered his way through New York machine politics, Democratic machine politics. That's actually what he knew. His attacks were lies. But that doesn't mean there aren't real problems with our elections. And now is the time to fix that. So we have a lot of work to do, but I just wanted to make sure that you guys remembered who Bill Barr is, what he represented, and the movement that has been built to undermine our elections. And that is a two-party movement that created that problem. We need independent oversight, not just to erase our democratic infrastructure. All right, speaking of democratic infrastructure, we have a great show today. We have Aaron Bastani on from Novara Media. He is going to be discussing the state of Brexit, what's happening with the Labour Party right now, and with Corbyn. That's straight from the UK. Aaron Bastani is going to be up next. And then later we have Napoleon the Legend and Akela Lacy on from The Intercept to talk about today's news. There is a lot of it. Stick around. We'll be right back with Aaron Bastani. Welcome back to the Nomiki Show. Aaron Bastani is the author of Fully Automated Luxury Communism. He's, of course, a journalist, and he's the co-founder of Novara Media. If you guys in the U.S. do not know about Novara Media, they just hit 100K subscribers on YouTube. It is brilliant. I really saw them up close when I covered the UK, the Labour Party conference in 2017, I think. And you guys threw this insane live event. It was so much fun. Really inspired me. You guys have done amazing work on the left in the UK, even though you're in this state of what's going on. Aaron, thanks for joining us. Oh, you're on mute.
Am I okay now, Nomiki?
You sound great. You look great.
I was just so taken aback by your wonderful introduction. I forgot to unmute myself. That's very kind of you. It was very, very kind of you. But I have to say, 100,000 YouTube subscribers by American standards is very small fry. But thank you. By British standards, it's very good.
I mean, by my standards, it's great because we're a new show. So listen, the algorithm is not helping anybody right now. So I think it's a big deal. So definitely go to Novara Media, go subscribe. They're doing incredible work. So Aaron, before we get to like the state of disarray and Brexit, I'm very curious what's happening in the Labour Party right now, given people have been kicked out. Like, it's just, I can't keep track of everything.
Yeah, so much. So for your audience, I don't know how familiar they are with British politics. Jeremy Corbyn was the leader from September 2015 until earlier this year. It was a roller coaster. He was a left leader, obviously, and did very well in 2017, surprised people, and then did very badly last year. A bunch of reasons, I think, principally Brexit, but we don't need to go into that necessarily. He's then replaced earlier this year by somebody called Keir Starmer, who very much lent into the same policies as Jeremy Corbyn. His pitch was basically, I will be Jeremy Corbyn, but I will be more credible to the establishment, which will allow me to nullify political attacks, which was a very impressive sell. So he did very well. He doesn't historically come from the left, but he did stuff in the 80s, the early 90s that people kind of believed it. I'm a bit of a skeptic, so I didn't, but I can see why people did. He becomes leader, and it's been kind of much for muchness because, of course, there's been COVID, and his polling was okay. Labour weren't, tearing up trees, which you could argue they should be because, of course, Britain and its response to COVID has been appalling, like the United States. But he'd been doing okay. And then we had the EHRC report come out a few months ago, which is our national body with regards to human rights. And it's critical of Labour in regards to anti-Semitism. It's nowhere near as bad as many people have said, but it's certainly not good. It says 2 people acted unlawfully, both of whom, by the way, I should add, had been expelled by the publication of this report.
Can I intervene just for 1 second? Where does this historically come from? Because this has been brought up over and over as if the Labour Party has always had these anti-Semitic roots, as if Boris Johnson's right wing doesn't as well. But I'm very curious.
It's just nonsense. I don't personally buy that. What's interesting in terms of recent history, so British Jews voted for the Conservative Party in 2015 to an extraordinary extent, like 65-35, despite the fact that Miliband was Jewish, and he would have been the second Jewish prime minister, the first since Benjamin Disraeli, although Disraeli converted. And the reason was in 2014, he made quite a controversial decision to effectively recognize a potential state of Palestine. And at the time, that led to people leaving the party, very critical response in parts of the media. Some of the high-profile figures who've attacked Corbyn, who've left the Labour Party because of Corbyn, they actually said, I'm leaving the Labour Party because of Ed Miliband. So there's clearly, I'm not saying it's the entire issue, but there's a major part of this was Labour's positioning on foreign policy, and particularly Israel-Palestine. That was a major part of it. And British Jews generally had left the Labour Party. We can discuss why, but before Jeremy Corbyn had become leader. In fact, the difference between 2015 under Ed Miliband and 2017, in terms of the British Jewish vote, who they're breaking for, it's not that different. But this whole discourse goes on sort of steroids after 2017. I would personally say that the issue was greatly exaggerated by elements of the media. By the way, if you say that, it can get you suspended from the Labour Party.
Really?
It can. That. Yes, if you say that. That's essentially what Jeremy Corbyn's been suspended for. But for instance, if I told you that on a national radio station, a journalist said that Jeremy Corbyn would effectively open up Auschwitz. A gentleman called Simon Heffer, a journalist, said that. I mean, clearly, whatever your thoughts on Jeremy Corbyn are, that's clearly an exaggeration. All the opinion polling in terms of how the public viewed the anti-Semitism problem within Labour, the interpretation of this was that like 30% of the party had been disciplined for anti-Semitism. In fact, it was like 0.03% of the party. I can't remember the exact figures, but you can understand why somebody might make that point. That you can say, on the one hand, there have been issues here, partly because it's a party that's not built for mass membership, which just surged in because of Jeremy Corbyn. And on the other hand, it's clearly been exaggerated in the media. Comparing Jeremy Corbyn to, Hitler or the Labour Party wanting to open up Auschwitz is obviously absurd. It's disgusting as well, I personally think. So Yeah, it's a strange one. But anyway, Jeremy Corbyn, on the day of the HRC report, which is not a perfect body, but I thought the report it released, it was pretty, I thought it was okay. He says, I accept all the recommendations of the report, but I'm not so sure about this and this. That saw him suspended within an hour. And that's why he's been suspended, even though he wanted all the recommendations to be implemented. And people since then have basically said he shouldn't be suspended. By the way, he was readmitted back into the party. His suspension was dropped after an NEC subcommittee said he hadn't broken any rules. So he was allowed back in the party. But then Keir Starmer says, well, he can't be an MP. So it's something called withdrawing the whip. So he's a Labour Party member, but he's technically not a Labour MP. Any member or any local party, and I know the Democratic Party doesn't have these, Labour Party has local parties in each constituency. Any constituency Labour Party, which says that Jeremy Corbyn should be given the whip back, will be, basically the meeting shouldn't happen. And anybody responsible for it will be suspended. Members saying this will be suspended. Wow. So clearly these are quite big infringements on freedom of speech, freedom of association, just saying that somebody should be readmitted to the parliamentary party when they've been readmitted as a member. And increasingly it does look like Starmer's kind of run out of road here. So 100 parties have voted for this. His personal approval ratings are tanking. People are leaving. Trade unions have cut funding to the party. So I think initially, about 6 weeks ago, they thought this will make us look strong. Attacking the left always plays well with the national media, but it's costing them money. And actually, in terms of Keir Starmer's personal ratings, they're doing very badly as a result.
I mean, all I see here is the left breaking up. When Labour's pulling out because of some whatever, I don't want to say neoliberal tendencies, but at least playing to the media, it just seems like this was a manufactured debate. We face something very similar here, which I'll touch on in a second, but a manufactured debate to pit different leftist leaders against each other, in which the ultimate effect is folks pull out, they get frustrated, they don't want to be a part of the system, they don't receive money. And the Democratic Party in 2017, you said that there are all these folks who already had left the Labour Party were threatening to leave. Alan Dershowitz famously, great symbol of the left. Alan Dershowitz, the lawyer who was defending Donald Trump just recently, he was on air on CNN in 2017 during the DNC chairs race, the Democratic National Committee's chairs race, attacking Keith Ellison for being anti-Semitic. Keith Ellison is Muslim, and saying, I'm going to leave the party. And he got all these, op-eds published everywhere. Alan Dershowitz is leaving the party. Good. Let it hit you on the way, out. Nobody aligns with Alan Dershowitz's insane politics, let alone his personal choices. But the messaging was so, I mean, that's not something new. The messaging from the Tories and the neoliberals here obviously echo each other when it's convenient and it works. But I just find it fascinating that, the message seemed to be coordinating at the time. Yeah. And
it's not just that people leave, which obviously they do. People don't want to be called a racist and an anti-Semite, an apologist. And these things are so overboard. I mean, the Auschwitz thing was just absurd. I think any normal person, James O'Brien, who's a host on that same radio station called, Labour Party members Holocaust deniers. I mean, this is, a lot of people say, I don't need this. And so quite justifiably, right? And that's one part of it. But another part is a lot of people who are nice people and they view themselves as nice people. They just don't want that confrontation. So in this country, in 2018, Labour was under pressure to adopt the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. They did. And then there were these 9 examples. And, the Labour Party said, we're not quite sure about one of them, which relates to Israel. So we don't want to adopt that example. We're going to tailor it. And by the way, Kenneth Stern, the gentleman who formulated the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, said that is entirely permissible because he never sort of wants to create this as something which would inform disciplinary processes because it could create problems around freedom of speech, which has been talked about by many people. Kenneth Stern, I think he wrote an article about this for The Guardian. It's the guy that came up with it. It's not I'm not saying some sort of contrarian, absurd take. Now, if I say that publicly in Britain, there'll be people who will say, oh, you're against the IHRA definition, therefore you're anti-Semitic. Well, why? Because you're saying that Jewish people can't have a homeland. Well, no, I don't support the definition because it doesn't permit the Palestinians to be able to have a homeland. So actually, I do take self-recognition and self ideas of self-government and self-determination quite seriously. So yes, the debate's very toxic, and I think you're right. Some people are walking away, but then some people say, "Oh, just accept the IHRA." Okay, all these Palestinian activists are saying we shouldn't, but you know what? We can draw a line under this. And of course, that's not how it works. There's never a line drawn under this because people like Alan Dershowitz aren't having these debates in good faith.
Right. I mean, so where does the future of the Labour Party go? And how do you build up from here? We're having the same conversations over here right now. But I'm very curious, especially given the state of Brexit, which I'd love to get your updates on.
Well, for us, it's a bit different to you guys. I mean, you guys have you have primaries, which is how you've got all these great people into the Democratic Party. And we don't have that. So, America and Britain have first past the post systems, which are deeply undemocratic, but at least you have primaries. So whether it's the Tea Party with the Republicans, whether it's the left within or the progressives within the Democratic Party, these organizations can renew themselves, right? Not necessarily for better, like with the Tea Party, but they can. The establishment of those parties can be undermined. We don't have primaries in this country. And so actually, I think it's very possible that the Labour Party is a far more inert, unresponsive organization than the Democratic Party. It has its own advantages, membership, sort of local membership, far more democratic party in terms of policy formation and so on, but not having primaries is a big problem. And so I do think it's possible that the left can't salvage the Labour Party. I don't think that's the case. I think ultimately Keir Starmer's project comes up on the rocks in probably 6 months to a year because they have no money, the polling isn't great, and realistically they can't win in 2024. And to save things, they need to get the left, not to save as in to win, as in to not be decimated. They need the biggest possible coalition going into the next election, which includes the left. So I don't think it's all bad news for the left, but it's a strange moment where you've got the Parliamentary Labour Party, 200 MPs, who I personally think many of those MPs are to the right of the public at large. I think it's much like, with Democratic senators, but the difference being we can't really shake them up like you guys can. I know it's not easy even for you guys, but at least it's possible. And that's a bit different for us. So I think the Labour Party will change, but it's going to take a long time. It's going to take 10, 15 years, I think.
And in terms of the trade unions who have pulled out, those who have pulled out, and I'm not sure how many remain, I mean, is there a way of pressuring or working with the unions, the traditional labor, not the Labour Party, to pressure more immediate change and shift? I mean, what are the mechanisms of, what are the pressure points?
So no union has yet to pull out, that's just to be clear. So Unite, the second largest union in the country, have cut funding to Labour.
Got it.
They may be cutting more funding, which is significant because I believe they gave Labour something like £9 million last year, which is a lot of money by the standards of British politics.
Oh, no, absolutely.
Unison is the largest union in the country. It's a right-wing union. The leadership's right-wing. It's had the same leader for 20 years. He's kind of like Lukashenko in Belarus. This is kind of Dave Prentice and Unison as the sort of Lukashenko of the union movement in this country, and the GMB, which is also a right-wing union. I don't think they're particularly smart unions. I don't think the leaderships are particularly smart. So they're backing Starmer, but then you've got Unite have reduced funds. The CWU, which is the Postal Workers Union, are talking about doing the same thing. The FBU, which is the Fire Brigades Union, are talking about the same thing. The Bakers Union is talking about leaving. And of the sort of 10 unions, 9 unions, 7 think Jeremy Corbyn should be reinstated. So it's quite clear that the mass of the Labour movement thinks he should be reinstated. But it's not universal. If it was universal, it would have happened by now. So do they have leverage? They have an immense amount of leverage because Keir Starmer's pitch was they can go and we'll get in these really high value donors instead to give us loads of money. And what's happened is Unite have cut their funds. Members have left. And of course, members are a great source of funds. About 100,000, we think around 100,000 people have left out of a party of 600,000 people. Wow. And then all they've got from private donors since Starmer became leader is about £200,000. which is kind of explicable. There's no election till 2024 and you have COVID. And so Labour, if the next 6 months are like the last 6 months, Labour all of a sudden don't really have much money. And so actually, members and the unions in that regard have a great deal of leverage, I think.
And I mean, is there talk of another party, a leftist party growing out of this?
No, because of our electoral system, there is talk of it, but I think it's idle chatter. I don't think it will go anywhere. I think where there are emerging discussions around a different kind of pole of attraction for the left, that's long been true in Scotland, of course. Scottish Labour have died effectively since 2015. For your audience out there, Scotland was historically one of the heartlands of Labour, as was South Wales, as was the North East, as was London. Scotland disappears in 2015. I think the SNP win 54 or 57 seats in Scotland, becomes a one-party state. Labour lose 40 MPs in Scotland overnight. And it's very possible that something similar now happens in Wales. I don't think it's guaranteed, because Welsh nationalism is a bit different to Scottish nationalism. Historically, Welsh nationalism is a linguistic nationalism, which is if Welsh nationalists spoke Welsh. And of course, if you don't, then you're not necessarily a Welsh nationalist. That's gradually changing. So it's very possible that what happened to Labour in Scotland happens in the south of Wales. People are talking about the Red Wall in England. I actually think its seats in South Wales are very, very vulnerable. You've got a London former barrister, ultra-Remainer, talking about, the IHRA definition being adopted by university. What are viewed as quite sort of marginal topics for most people, whether you agree with them or not. And I think that could be where there's a different sort of political shift. I think the English left, as a result, is going to have to kind of recalibrate. But no, that's not going to mean a new political party in England, because our electoral system would mean, I think, it would necessarily fail. Yeah.
Let's talk about the state of Brexit and these trade deals, and in the midst of COVID, how your government is responding to this crisis. Obviously it's very different than the rest of the EU, but can you kind of give us a little bit of an update on what's happening?
Yeah, I mean, Britain is doing almost as badly as the United States. There's a great piece by Pankaj Mishra in the London Review of Books about the end of Anglo-America, and I think that's right. I think that's what this pandemic has done. It's really destroyed a certain idea of the nation and of capitalism. That Anglo-American model, I think, is dead. It's important to say there are other parts of the European Union which have also done very badly: Spain, Italy, France. The outstanding country of the large countries is Germany. And I think Germany sort of sits somewhere between the EU and the East Asian countries, which have just been formidable. Germany, Denmark, Norway have done incredibly well. Britain has done very poorly. I mean, Britain has, I think, easily been the worst performer in the whole of the European Union. What's interesting, though, of course, is that the Tory party is still leading in the polls. There's very few. There's maybe been 2 polls since March where Labour are neck and neck, but in many polls the Tories are kind of 3-4 points ahead. And of course, people talk about shy Tories or shy Republicans. Actually, that tends to underestimate the lead they might have. So it's strange. People understand there's been a sort of cataclysmic response from government, but that hasn't really led to a necessarily left analysis of what next. And that's partly explained. You can't attack the left for this necessarily. That's partially explicable by the fact that the Conservatives have, in some elements, run a sort of quasi-socialist response to this. So the public healthcare response has been terrible, like America's, but when it came to the economic response, it was much better. Guaranteeing people furlough, which is payments to not work up to 80% of your income with a ceiling of £2,500 a month. And many people have been on that this year. It's carrying through till March. We've had all kinds of other benefits temporarily increased. So it's been handled terribly, but the government in the process then ran, I think, a deficit this year. We're running a deficit of like 400 billion, which is like 2.5 times what it was in 2009. It's just extraordinary. And so, when the government is just being so generous with money, you can kind of understand why people would still be backing them. The Tories are remaining popular in some places because they aren't really behaving like Tories. But the public health response has been so dreadful. You would have expected it to, I think, have made a bigger dent into their sort of popularity. It hasn't. That said, the vaccine came at just the right time. I think if we had another 6 months of this, I think there would have been major problems for them.
But you're talking about this deficit. I mean, how is that going to play out in the midst of I guess these trade deals with the rest of the EU? I mean, does that play a role at all in trying to make up for the deficit?
It's a strange one. We've never really been here before. Britain's sort of its national debt to its GDP ratio. This doesn't really matter for America because, of course, it can just print off dollars and it's the world's reserve currency. Britain
but it's
can't do
also
that.
the thing that all the Republicans, they only care about. So
yeah, bizarrely,
Yes.
if there's a country on earth which can just keep on printing money, it's the United States. It probably can. In Britain, it's slightly different, obviously, because we're not, we don't have this imperial army that can maintain a number of regimes in our favor that buy dollars when we want them to buy them and so on, or buy our products when we want to sell them. So it's going to be a major problem. But Britain has a number of sort of economic shortcomings, and it's had them for a very long time. So one is, of course, it's not exporting much. It hasn't exported for a very long time. And it made up for those exports because it was an oil exporter, had North Sea oil. That's now going. And of course, because of the City of London, which counted effectively as exports. But it sounds strange, but there were exports of services.
Yeah,
exactly. And that's kind of now, it's weakened. And so really the British economic model, the Thatcherite economic model, has been on life support since 2008. And what's clear is it isn't really going to be replaced by anything particularly good. I mean, it may carry on like a zombie for another 10 years. I don't know. I wouldn't have thought it would last this long. It has. But we're not going to see sort of rising growth. And so you've got a strange mix of weak exports, a high deficit, high public debt, low growth. Historically, that's not a very good recipe. At the same time, we've got falling wages, we've got falling home ownership. And so you see this polarization in this country in particular around asset wealth. So people who own houses in this country, they've had a mortgage holiday some people have had a mortgage holiday for 3 months, for 6 months, right? And actually the crisis, this has been good for them. I was speaking to a guy who was a jeweler, and he said, well, I don't pay rent on this building. The price of gold has shot up, and I've been able to put my staff on furlough. And I've just been working myself. And he said, I've probably made money. But of course, if you're a renter, because of course gold prices were crazy a few months ago. But if you're a renter and you lose your job, you're really screwed. And so people who had assets, people who were homeowners, were affected by this crisis very, very differently. And it's important to say, when you look at Labour's support base in the last election, even though they lost, they were winning amongst under 45s and amongst renters. And those are the people that are still being crushed by this. And is there 40% of Britain which owns a home outright, has paid the mortgage or is paying the mortgage, is relatively insulated from these things? Maybe they're retired, Right. Is that enough for the Tories to win? I think it probably is. That's the thing. Labour won a majority of the working age population in 2019, and they got hammered. And that's an important question for us all to think about, within ageing societies, and particularly because in both the US and the UK, more so here, I think, younger people are just less likely to vote.
And just before we wrap up, is there rent relief? Is this because there are no rent relief packages, or there's a moratorium? Temporary moratorium was used until March, and folks are going to own thousands of dollars, maybe in some cases much, much, much more. Is that what this is about?
So there's a mortgage holiday. If you own a house, you don't have to pay the mortgage, or you have to agree it with your bank, but all the banks are doing it because the government's instructed them to effectively do that. You have a moratorium on mortgage payments, but if you're renting, you don't have a moratorium. And so
very similar to here. Yeah. In many states, at least.
Yeah. So there was a moratorium on people kicking out tenants. I think that's now expired. But effectively, you could have a situation where the landlord doesn't have to pay the rent, and yet they can still demand rent from their tenants. Clearly, it's a very unfair system. But the Labour Party, being what it is now, it's lost that left leadership. It doesn't want to get involved. It's very happy for basically a lot of people to be crushed this year and kind of drift along, which was the strategy. It was doing okay, of course, until the Jeremy Corbyn farrago, and now things are changing. And like I said, the next couple of months, like the last couple of months, I think there'll be mounting pressure on Keir Starmer.
I think so too. I think I mean, I don't know when the numbers are going to kick in for you, but tens of millions of people are going to be evicted. The courts are going to be jammed up, not have access to legal services. There aren't going to be enough attorneys who are willing to provide those free legal services. We're going to have a major homeless crisis in this country very soon, on top of all the money that these landlords who supposedly care so much, they're going to be able to write off and have a, they're that it's very similar to the housing crisis, except no one has anywhere to go. Aaron Bastani, so fascinating. Thank you so much for spending your evening with us out there.
My pleasure.
I'd love to have you back on soon to get more updates, but best of luck to you guys across the pond.
Best of luck to you, Nomiki. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. All right, we will be right back in 2 seconds with Akela Lacy and Napoleon the Legend. If you aren't already doing so, make sure to click that subscribe button and smash that like button and get in the chat. We're pretty far into the show for this, but you got to make sure to do that because that's how the show keeps going. That's how we catch up to Novara Media and so many other folks like Sam Cedar, who's about to hit 1 million. And of course, join us at patreon.com/the Nomiki Show. This is the time to indoctrinate your family. Send them over here for as low as $5 a month. For those of them who just don't want to pay MSNBC cable news anymore, we've got a Rachel Maddow Challenger level. So definitely check that out. You get extra content every single day. You get the show and we have swag. We'll be right back in 2 seconds. 2 seconds. All right, welcome back to the Nomiki Show. Akela Lacy is a politics reporter at The Intercept. And of course, Napoleon the Legend is back from hiatus, vacation. He is an Afrobeat hip hop artist, and he is one of our favorite activists, regular and leftist media. All right, guys, thanks for sticking around. We had some tech issues at the top, so everything's a little bit delayed, but let's roll with this. We have people across this country who are potentially about to face evictions. We're not even at the worst point yet. And mothers and families are resorting to providing food for their families by stealing food, which I don't even like using that word steal, but we are rarely in this state. This is a real crisis, and let's just roll the clip.
We may get there, Joe. I mean, Democrats are looking around and frankly, some of the centrist Republicans they're negotiating with are saying there are state and local jurisdictions everywhere that really need help. You have transit systems that are on the verge of collapsing. I mean, even just here in Washington, they're talking about, completely cutting the metro system that serves downtown D.C. Republicans argue that this is a problem that's mostly experienced in blue states and blue cities. But I think centrists in both parties are looking around and saying, no, actually, I mean, you remember those Michigan Republicans came to Washington to try and talk to President Trump about the election. And instead, they pled with him, please send us money to help shore up our finances. This is, a problem that is affecting everyone. And frankly, there's more agreement on it. They seem to have struck a deal on state and local funding in that bipartisan group. So that means liability has always been the stickier piece of this. And why is that? There are a lot of interest groups, businesses, trial lawyers, obviously. But think about if you're a worker. I mean, there have already been lawsuits around that. There was a meat packing plant in Iowa, for example, where people were ordered to go to work in the beginning of the outbreak. And a lot of people got sick. A lot of people died. Okay, so Democrats are looking.
All right. I mean, what I find so interesting about this clip is she identifies the crisis and she identifies what's standing in the way of dealing with the crisis. Akela, you've been reporting quite a bit on this, just in general, the crisis. But how is it? What is it that's happening right now with the Democratic leadership? They're frozen. I mean, how can you not? You look back to even the Bush era. Nixon 60s, you had a Democratic Party that was willing to take on the Republicans in big interest, and they're just frozen. What's going on? Is there something missing that we're not seeing internally in Washington?
Yeah, so I mean, I think part of what they just mentioned in that piece, which is really important, is that the issue at stake right now for passing another relief package is coming down to McConnell wanting to include this provision that would shield corporations from any sort of lawsuit from workers who get sick with COVID, being forced to go into work, and they pushed Democrats basically to say that they would be okay with giving up state and local aid in order to get some wiggle room on the liability thing. So I don't, we've seen Democrats waffling on this. They haven't had a sense of urgency, to pass another relief bill. It's been like over 250 days, and instead of taking stock of what they could have done and where they could have pushed back harder on Republicans, they've spent the last several months kind of blaming each other for what, a poor showing in November, rather than looking at like, okay, well, actually, we haven't done anything for our constituents in 2/3 of the year, and people are literally dying. So I don't think it's necessarily that they're missing something, but that there's no political will at the levels of leadership to stand up to Republicans, where it's coming from below in the party and from the left wing, like people that are saying, we're not going to stand for this kind of stuff. But again, they don't have leverage to get anything done. So I think it's more of the same from leaders who don't feel accountable to their constituents. Nancy Pelosi is not going to lose an election anytime soon. Right. So yeah, it's just devastating. Yeah.
It's so interesting because as much as I want to stay away from this debate, I really want to come at it from the perspective of why this debate is relevant right now. This whole Jimmy Dore debate over for those of you guys who don't know, Jimmy Dore got into a Twitter exchange, and he's been championing taking on AOC and the Squad and pushing Medicare for All to a vote in order to withhold their vote in supporting Nancy Pelosi as Speaker, as leader of the party. And I think what that whole debate, and there's so many different angles of this debate, what his intentions are, et cetera. I think what's so fascinating about that, though, is what he's tapping into is, and by growing his support of like pressuring the Squad, essentially, is he's tapping into Americans who are feeling exasperated and angry that leadership is not stepping up. And what he's highlighting is exactly what Akela just said, which is that the Squad they're in an institution. They only have so much power, and where and why they use their voice at different times, there could be pushback that could actually limit their ability to use their voice. So Napoleon, you're an activist, you're obviously an artist. How do you see the movement effectively pressuring? Where are the pressure points? How do we actually pressure our lawmakers right now to actually stepping up to this crisis?
I mean, we have to keep speaking about it and be speaking up and really, I mean, the sense of urgency and the dire of this whole situation. I mean, I'm seeing food lines like around Brooklyn where people in cars waiting for food. I've never seen that in my life since I've been in these parts of the United States, and I think that. We need to really, like Akela said, no, we haven't gotten anything from them. Like the stimulus bill, even if it does happen to come, it's gonna be perceived as being too late. Even though people are gonna be happy that they have some sort of help, it's still gonna be perceived as being too late because I don't know, for whatever reason, Nancy Pelosi didn't want to do it before the elections or whatever. But I think it's important that. Us in the left and us as progressives have to unified message and keep, pushing whoever we support to keep speaking up and to say that this stimulus bill is do or die. It's literally do or die for people, because if people are starving, people are in the street, the pandemic is getting worse. And what do we have left? We have no country left. If like the majority of us are like struggling to get the basic necessities.
And it's, in New York, for instance, and probably in several other states, we're very likely to go into a lockdown in the coming days or even weeks. Simultaneously, there is an eviction moratorium that is about to expire potentially. It is on the table to extend it, of course. But how are people going to lock down if they're in lines for food and don't have a home? Akela, like, are you call lawmakers? Do they get it? Do they psychologically understand what's happening?
Some of them do. Frankly, I don't think so. I think some of them don't care, to be completely honest with you. Like, there's
Democrats.
Yes, yeah, and Republicans. I mean, I think it's right, yeah. But I think some of them don't think that they. It's sad to see kind of like the development of this over time in Congress, but like there's sort of like a lack of morale on what Democrats think matters to voters from like listening to this consultant class over the last several election cycles, but also like B, having the last 4 years of Trump where basically they could get away with not doing anything because they're like, oh, well, we can't do anything. So instead of that pushing them to try to be better legislators or better representatives, they've, gone more into this mood of like, okay, well, like, nothing's going to pass the Senate, so like what do you want us to do? And it's like it's crazy making, right? Yeah.
I have a theory, and I know this is like a little conspiratorial, but it's not like Democrats haven't done this before. I don't think they want to win the Senate. I think they love being able to continue to take their special interest money and play the good guy up against the bad guy, who is Mitch McConnell, who constantly holds things up. You mentioned, this new norm. Bill Barr is out of the White House right now, and according to progressives, of course, we won't miss him. But in his resignation letter, he celebrates Trump's punitive immigration policy and appointment of right-wing judges to the courts. So the legacy of Bill Barr will continue. But I'm really concerned personally just that this is our new norm. And we're not going to fix these problems. It's just like the Biden administration's stasis is Obama era 2009, but that's not where we are. That's not the stasis right now and where he has to build back better. Napoleon, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think they're going to immediately have to address all these issues and work on undoing the damage that William Barr has done. I mean, I haven't followed attorney generals for that long, but the way he was acting, I even Judge Sessions, who is a horrible person, had at least the tact to recuse himself during the investigations. And William Barr, he just went all out for Trump, and he was basically Trump's personal lawyer. And I don't know, this has to change because it undermines the confidence of people with just overall governance when people just abuse their power, because that's all that was going on under William Barr's, stay.
There's talk of Andrew Cuomo being the AG. Akela, I'd love to hear your response just to that, but also, do you think that Andrew Cuomo, I can't even say it with a straight face. Do you think that Andrew Cuomo will be the ambassador for fair democracy and be the people's lawyer?
Yeah, I think no. We had a sort of like a period earlier in the pandemic where everyone had goo-goo eyes for Cuomo for some reason, while he was simultaneously like threatening to cut the education budget and, just doing basically nothing. And yeah, I mean, he's gotten a book out of the pandemic. He seems to be doing well and, becoming more and more outspoken about, whatever the topic of the day is. But yeah, I don't. Yeah, exactly. Like I would be surprised if he ends up getting into the cabinet. But another thing, just going back to what Napoleon said, like the situation and what you mentioned about the stasis in the Biden administration, he told reporters yesterday, something that he thought was like a good takeaway from this background call that he had with Republican senators, that they told him that, he's going to have to wait 6 to 8 months and then eventually, they'll work with him, which, you have a situation where the president-elect thinks that at a time when like half of the House Republicans came out trying to overturn the election results, like what was that, last week? Then you have him coming out and like the administration is trying to create positions to reach out to Republicans. They're still in this place where we're reacting to the GOP, even though he is the incoming president, instead of saying like, oh, like actually we're going to run the show now. Like he's telling his supporters to be grateful that Republicans are going to give them, 6 to 8 months and then start working, when actually that's that's the legislative session that they would need to be active within before it becomes, we're back into another election cycle. So that was really disheartening to see yesterday, and just goes to show that, like, I don't really think they have any sort of plan for taking on the GOP. They just are happy that they got in, and they're going to go in and do nothing, basically.
And I'm like, what's more makes me more furious about this is the assumption that we don't win the Senate. So is he just not going to try to win those 2 seats or 1 seat or whatever in Georgia right now? I mean, I guess I'm really confused over whether or not Biden wants to be an FDR-like president, or if Biden is just going to do what he knows so well, which is play the game and then like use Republicans as to blame. I mean, Napoleon, like,
I think it's the last. I mean, I think he's just going to be Biden. That's what he's been doing his whole career, and he's de facto Republican with a Democrat disguise. And I don't expect him to. I think, like Akela kind of implied, that they're going to kind of come in. They got the power. They're going to wing it. And to your point, Nomiki, maybe they don't care about winning that much, because it'll give them cover for them not to make any type of progress, just blaming everything on the Republicans instead of really trying to push for actual change and actual material gains for the people.
What do you think, Akela?
I mean, I don't want to say that they don't want to win the Senate, but I do think that it's probably not at the top of their list of priorities right now. I think part of that is because they don't think that it's going to happen, just, based on how Georgia went, even though, that would be counterintuitive. Like, if Biden won the state for the first time in several decades, then it would stand to reason that, they would have a good chance right now. But I think also the tenor of the race down there is like, it's kind of like like a microcosm of all, the election cycle that we just had. You have people, running ads saying that they're anti-police, and running at, like, pushing Raphael Warnock on into, like, accusing him of being anti-Semitic when he's not even running on anything related to Israel policy. We're like rehashing the same fights over and over again. So my sense is that national Democrats are kind of like, okay, well, like, we'll do what we can. Like, we're gonna, do whatever basic amount of fundraising we would do, but it doesn't seem like that's a priority right now. They're much more concerned about, putting together the cabinet positions and fielding criticism from the left on those picks right now.
I'm very curious if Obama is going to step up and go out there and campaign for them. I mean, I feel like that's always an indication of how much they really care. We will see. Akela Lacy writes for The Intercept. Go check out our work. And Napoleon DeLegend, who has you have a new album out. Is it sold out? It's still?
The physical copies are sold out.
Yes.
Digitals don't sell out, so go ahead and get
it. So where can people check it out?
You can check it out on my website.
Which is? We'll put it in the bio.
Legend.com.
Very well done. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us. And, there's no shortage of crises to discuss. So I'm sure next time we'll have a whole other batch. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Nomiki.
All right, we have some shout outs. I know from the top of my head that Harvey K is in the chat. Thank you to Harvey K, Professor Harvey K, also a frequent guest of the show. I believe he's going to be on Thursday. You guys are free to leave if you need to go. Professor Harvey K will be on Thursday, and we are going to talk about, I'm just throwing it out right now, we're going to talk about Biden, like, who is he most similar to? Is he like a Johnson character? Is he the FDR? Or is he just going to be his own man? Because I think that's going to help us, if we reflect on history, help us understand where we're going, and if there's any way to pressure any of these leaders internally right now, which I think really is the debate that folks are having right now over this whole, do we pressure the squad to take Medicare for all to the floor and potentially most likely lose, and what happens as a result? They lose their committee positions. They lose, their ability to be called on in a hearing. I mean, these are consequential issues. All right. Prairie Fire Kowalski from Nebraska, of course, sending love. He says, went through the ice, because he was walking on thin ice when he called into the Majority Report. And I was like, is he actually on thin ice? So he says, went through ice. I'm wet and cold, but the cow is with her calf now. So winning. love winter. Here is indoctrination dollars or cold brewed fun. Thank you so much, guys. And thank you, Prairie Fire Kowalski. Al Walski, loving your stalwart commitment to the plain truth as opposed to clever purveyors of disinformation, otherwise known as damn lies. Yeah, guys, I'm going to be pushing harder on this. There is a business model here. And if you want to become famous and make a lot of money, it is really easy to tap into easy, cheap fights and arguments and call people out as being shills or sold out. And all I have to say is, from my own perspective, I like to look at hosts and say, okay, you're critical and you're calling everybody else a shill. Have you actually done anything in movement politics that you're such a strategist on? Have you ever organized in your backyard? Have you ever taken on the DNC? Have you ever knocked on doors before or made phone calls? I'm not saying you need to have that experience to have an opinion, but if you're going to call everybody else who has done that work a shill, it takes a lot of courage to take on Democratic leaders and to be smeared in the press. And there's no doubt that the squad is under tremendous pressure from every single angle. They've got death threats in regularly because they're posted on Fox News. They have the neoliberals going after them and placing smear pieces on them. And then to have the left, certain members of the left go after them. I don't think that's how we win. I think we win through solidarity and really recognizing and being human with each other. As Michael Brooks so famously said, be ruthless to institutions and kind to humans, right? That is the line. You have to be kind to humans. M. Toussaint, thanks, Nomiki, does not open the Jimmy door. Yeah, the Nomiki does not open. Got it. Okay, I didn't get the emojis. The Nomiki, it's an emoji, does not open the Jimmy door. It's an emoji. Very clever. All right. Big thank you to MIDI Doctors for working the algorithms, and huge thanks to Bob and our new mod, Orb, for keeping the chat room troll free. Can you keep my Twitter page troll free too? I'm getting ready for it. All right, guys, be well. Tomorrow we have a great show. Definitely check us out at 3 p.m. Eastern and join us at patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. The link is right there. Go check it out. Take care, guys.